Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Vega Virtual Talks. Today's topic is on strategy during a pandemic. My name is Narita Pretorius. I am the campus navigator at the IIE Vega School, Durban. I will be the facilitator for the day. Our structure for the talk is that we'll go through introduction first. We will then have the three speakers to each present their section and give us their take on strategy during a pandemic. We will then open for discussion. There's a section where we have predetermined questions. We also have one of our special guests that will pose some questions, and then we'll open it for some questions as part of the closing session. I would first like to introduce Greg Day. Greg Day is our partner for Vega Talks, and Greg is the editor and journalist of KZN Invest. He has a keen interest in cities, economic and social development, business, entrepreneurship, and education. And Greg has been involved in a number of media, including newspapers, magazines, television, and radio. For all the speakers and participants, I have added the URL so that you can have a look at their profiles and the work that they do. Greg also interprets what we do during Vega Talks and produces then an article that is then published as part of the KZN Invest magazine. Welcome, Greg, to the talk.
Thank you. Appreciate being here and always.
Always. Thank you, Greg. Next up, I'd like to introduce Robert. Robert Grace is the co-founder and head of strategy at MNC Saatchi Group South Africa. Robert, as a strategist, explores what the future of brands will look like post-COVID-19. He believes in the philosophy of brutal simplicity of thought, creating simple yet beautiful solutions for a complex world. Robert is a member of the Communicators Network organized through the United Nations. Robert, welcome to the talk.
Hi, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining.
Brilliant. And then I'd like to introduce Tatiana Ndlovu. Tatiana is the media group head at Nedbank. Tatiana is a marketing and media strategic planner across various sectors, including banking, ICT, insurance, media and research, telecoms, and FMCG. And she's got a passion for education, especially for the youth. Tatiana completed a master's in strategic marketing from Wits Business School. Tatiana, welcome to the talk.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
And then I'd like to introduce Dr. Carla Enslin. Carla is the founding member and head of strategy and new business development at the IIE Vega School. Carla's interest is in brand strategy, brand identity systems, and contact strategies. She's a master supervisor at Vega. She's also the member of the Brand Africa Council, a research associate at the University of Stellenbosch Business School, and teaching fellow at the University of Cape Town's Graduate School of Business. Carla, thank you for joining the talk too.
It's a privilege to be with you.
Thank you. What is really nice about today is that we've got a beautiful national representation. I'm sitting here in Durban, and so is Greg. We've got Tatiana based in Johannesburg, Robert and Carla based in Cape Town. So it's lovely to see that we've got a national Vega Talks happening today. Right, the first session is going to be Robert. Robert, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you so much for going up first, and we look forward to hear your discussion.
Brilliant, thanks, Narita, and thank you to Vega for setting up these forums. I think they're really valuable and useful, and I just also thank you to Vega for the really important role you play in bringing bright young minds into the creative industries. It really is appreciated, certainly from an agency perspective. So I guess in my role, and firstly, welcome to everybody joining. I hope this finds you safe and sane, where we're 8 weeks into lockdown and yet another webinar. So thank you for giving up of your time and looking at your screens and a voice speaking to you from it. We do appreciate it. So I guess in my role, I've been spending a lot of time with brands like Standard Bank, sorry, Tatiana, I know they're the competitor, Nando's and Takealot to navigate these adverse times. And I guess, what do you do when you find yourself in the single biggest global event and the single biggest global conversation that has ever taken place in one moment? And I think to answer that, because it's a big question, you need to ask the right questions. And I want to share a few of these with you today, what I've been asking, what we've been asking, and hopefully it's something useful for you to take away and apply to your efforts. So to start off, actually a couple of weeks ago, I was on another webinar with somebody called John Paul DeJoira. He's actually the founder of Paul Mitchell Hair Care and Patron Tequila, both billion-dollar brands now. And his talk was on adversity, and given that he was at one stage homeless and selling Paul Mitchell Hair Care door to door, he knows a thing or two about coming through it. And he said something so simple but so incisive. And he said, where you focus your attention is most likely what will happen. And I think it is the first question we need to ask of ourselves right now. Where are we focusing our attention? Because what we do know is that hype loves pandemics. And so it's easy to get caught up in the here and now of what is going on. And perhaps that was probably correct 8 to 10 weeks ago, but I think shifting our attention to what next. And when I look at just about every single conversation I'm having right now, it is all about what does this new world look like? Do we predict these profound shifts? And you're seeing all these articles and headlines coming out. And yes, perhaps in part, we will see some of them. But I guess I take a slightly more pragmatic and practical view. I have a background in data analytics and customer behavior. And what I know is that as human beings, we do have an unbelievable ability to pick up the pieces. And what we do know is that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So before you look at it, I think at how brands should respond, what are we going to do? We need to ask the right questions up front about what are consumers going to do? How are they going to respond? And what I want to share with you are 3 responses that we see in the conversations that we are now having with our clients. And the first one is this response around release. After being constrained, and I think we can feel it now, Monday's coming, we're all going to get out outside of the 6 to 9 window. Some of us might go and stock up on some wine or some alcohol. There will be an immediate need to experience life, albeit in a slightly restricted way. But for brands, it's a rare window of opportunity to, in some cases, grow your brand equity disproportionately by how you respond. And if you don't already have a plan in place, you need to be moving quickly. And really the question that you need to answer here is, how is your brand going to meet that immediate need for release that your consumer might be wanting? The second one is around reset. And absolutely what this period has done is certain behaviors have shifted, many of them forced, and some will last and some will merge with kind of previous behaviors, but particularly online behavior. If you look at shopping or working or hobbies or socializing. And more than ever, consumers are experiencing a broad range of customer experiences. Some of them brilliant, but some of them not. In fact, probably quite a few not, because many brands are still trying to grapple with this online digital customer experience. And what's going to start happening is that consumers are going to start comparing these experiences, not just within your categories, but across categories, and stacking them up against each other. And I guess the really simple question here is, does your brand experience live up to the new expectations that consumers will have emerging from this period? And lastly, and perhaps the more higher order one, is this idea of reframing. There will be some shifts in priorities from a consumer perspective, especially as we enter recessionary times. People are going to be where they spend their time and where they spend their money. And I always say during a recession, it's not that all the money completely disappears. There is still money. I think people are just a little bit more cautious as to where they're going to place it. And so more than ever, as a brand, you have to answer in a single phrase, what is the role your brand plays in your consumer's life? And particularly in a post-pandemic world, what is that answer? And I think if you can answer that question, you're very well placed to get through this. My biggest advice, though, would be that whatever it is you are doing, do not stop. And yes, well, it is probably appropriate that some brands go into quarantine, they go quiet for a while. It's not a period where you should be doing nothing. should be doing things like fine-tuning and adapting your strategies. And this is research from Millward Brown looking at the last recession, and they did a study that showed that companies that went dark or halved investment took between 3 to 5 years to recover to. What you decide now has lasting effects. And conversely, stronger brands that are invested in, recover a hell of a lot faster. This is research from Kantar on their Brand Z study, where they looked at their top powerful brands and their stock performance versus the S&P 500, and they found that they recovered 9 times faster following the financial crisis of 2008. So now is really the time to be looking at your strategies, looking at what's next, and where you choose to invest. But perhaps the single most important question when navigating these adverse times is, what does success look like? And this is beyond the numbers, and it has to be beyond the short-term sales goal. And rather answer that by putting your customer front and center and asking just one really simple question. How do you want people? And if you can answer that, and your brand with confidence delivers to it consistently, I bet that your brand stands a far better chance of not just surviving this pandemic, but actually thriving when we're through it. So some questions, quite precise questions. I think they demand precise answers. I think if you're a brand owner or you're an agency person who works with brands, I think these are the questions that we need to answer if we are to see our brands not just get through it, but thrive. Thank you.
Robert, thank you so very much. I am a keen believer that if you ask the right questions, you're going to get the right kind of direction and responses. So it's wonderful to hear that. I'm going to quickly open. Are there any observations that the panel would like to share at this point based on what Robert covered today?
Yes, so please may I ask a question? Robert, the signal went down on my side. Would you mind repeating what you said before it broke out, that put your customer first, and then you spoke for a couple of sentences afterwards that I lost entirely. Would you mind repeating it?
Sure, absolutely. So I guess it comes back to what I call kind of the most fundamental question, which is what are you measuring? And if you don't know what you're measuring, how do you know what you're doing is right? And as I always say, what gets measured gets done. So, I always say, how do you want people to feel? And I think if you can answer that and your brand with confidence delivers to it consistently, your brand stands a far better chance of not just getting through this pandemic, but actually thriving when we're through it.
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Robert, and thank you, Greg, for asking that question. I am the timekeeper, so I'm going to move into the next speaker. And next up, we've got Tatiana. So Tatiana, this is where you take over. Thank you for doing your bit today.
Thank you so much, and good morning again to everybody, and really thank you for taking the time to join us. Thank you, Vega, for your continued efforts in building great minds. We really appreciate it as an industry as well. So I kept my media and advertising hat on when thinking about how brands should shift their brand building strategies during this challenging time. And I've identified 4 guiding principles really that I believe every brand should adopt during these unprecedented times of COVID-19. So the first principle really, and we spoke about it earlier, is around not disinvesting or going completely dark. And I know that, every marketer is tempted now to want to put away every rand and every cent back into the business. But it's okay to pull back, but do not disinvest or go completely dark. And then the second guiding principle really is about adapting your media and your advertising strategies to ensure contextual relevance. So context always very important, especially now. The third guiding principle really is around connections, right? So you want to continue to cultivate your relationships with your key stakeholders, your employees, your customers, your suppliers. And then the fourth guiding principle for me is the brand, which is the heart of any organization. So you want to make sure that your brand maintains its brand narrative or its brand story. The brand must be single-minded and it must continue to deliver against its brand promise. Now, this is obviously not cast on stone, and it's also a continuous process. So you want to make sure that you're continuously and you're constantly reassessing these guiding principles to make sure that you're still on the right direction and the right path. Now, many advertisers have obviously pushed the pause button on their marketing activities. Most have cancelled events. So if I put on my Nedbank hat, we've obviously had to put on hold our Nedbank Cup as an example. We've postponed a lot of our investment whilst we consider our strategic options. And this is obviously in light of level 5, level 4 restrictions. We'll see what level 3, 2, and 1 look like. So businesses will definitely make less money. Therefore, they will want to spend less money on advertising. And we know every single time there are talks of budget cuts in the business, marketing is the first department that the CFO looks to. Global ad spend has slowed down, and South Africa is not immune to this trend. So, however, even despite these issues, do not go completely dark. So we've seen, for instance, that despite lower levels of car travel, there's still an increased usage or listenership of radio. People turn to radio as a trusted source of news, information during a crisis. We've seen that podcast listening has increased, so has streaming or listening via apps. Digital media is seeing significant growth. So you're seeing that a lot of marketers are migrating spend from traditional channels to digital channels. So social media is booming. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. Video consumption is at an all-time high. YouTube released a study about a week ago that shows that YouTube's average viewing time is currently at an all-time high. There's growth in gaming, and not only as an alternative to other entertainment, but also just as a means of socializing without physical contact rather. And this offers brands the opportunity to reach this audience in platforms that are very relevant, but also in a very meaningful way. Online streaming, Spotify, Deezer, there's a platform called View, Showmax, Netflix, all on the rise. We've also seen spike in traffic sites. And with people working from home, video conferencing and file sharing platforms also offer great advertising opportunities. We've seen that at-home entertainment consumption has obviously surged with an estimated 60% increase in the amount of content that is being streamed. We've noted already a change in the consumer journey. So where people used to historically browse online and buy offline, we've seen that the pendulum has now swung to browsing online and buying online. So you want to make sure that your brand is available at those key moments. Brands which decide to continue spending, however, are going to face the choice of reducing your advertising budgets to sustain some level of brand awareness at very low intensities, or to maintain advertising in a failing market. And I think both mean shaving budgets lower either way. Top performing mediums right now are digital, TV, and radio, whilst cinema, out-of-home advertising, and print have really been negatively affected. But we do, of course, expect that the impact is going to ease as the country moves to lower levels of lockdown. The second guiding principle was around making sure that the context is kept at the heart of all your media and advertising strategies. So 88% of consumers have noted that this pandemic has changed the type of content that they're engaging with. And 58% of the consumers are actively seeking information and news on this disease, with 59% being more focused on news now more than they have before. So content shouldn't just focus on hard selling, but it should be adapted to ensure relevance and to ensure that consumers really feel as though brands understand what they're going through. We've seen that a lot of digital publishers have placed restrictions in place, or they've put restrictions in place to prevent brands from taking advantage of COVID to manipulate consumers via advertising strategies. So the likes of Twitter, the likes of Google have put these restrictions in place. 32% of consumers who have a specific sentiment towards a brand are saying that, the suitability of messaging is so important when advertising alongside COVID-19 content, and that the content should take sensitivity into consideration. So to my earlier point, you don't want to be seen as the brand that is taking advantage of consumers because of where they find themselves psychologically and emotionally and financially as well. Whilst keeping these trends in mind, it's important to use smart targeting across your channels to ensure that your brands aren't advertising on negative COVID-19 content. So brand safety remains a huge priority. The third guiding principle really is about cultivating and harnessing your relationships. So you want to make sure that you take your employees along the journey with you. I can't stress how important employees are in an organization. When I did my dissertation, I wrote around the importance of an employee being a company's number one strategic asset and biggest source of competitive advantage. So you want to make sure that you align them behind a bigger purpose. And most importantly, you want to match your external efforts with your internal efforts. So your employees are your biggest brand ambassadors. You don't want to leave them behind. Now, from a media perspective, you want to ensure that your marketing campaign is tested, ensure campaign effectiveness, campaign relevance. There's a number of tools that you can use, tools like social listening tools, to make sure that you're constantly testing the sentiment that is in the market, but also your sentiment as a brand and how consumers are responding to the marketing efforts that you're putting out there. So media owners are going to obviously make a lot less money, and the result is they either offering more discounts to get their share of the pie, or some are even going the opposite way in terms of protecting their margins. But there's definitely going to be a clamp on clients who are looking to cut their committed spend. And I mean, I've just gone through an entire exercise, and the conversations have been very different, where you get media owners who are willing to come to the table and others who are saying, no, thank you, we are not willing to support. We are standing very strict against our contractual obligations with you. So relationships really between media owners or publishers, agencies and clients are just severely tested around the negotiation table. So, others are keen on encouraging brands to defer rather than cancel a booking. So others are saying, fine, we understand that the level of traffic, especially at level 5 and level 4, is compromised. But instead of canceling the booking completely, let's defer to when we get to level 2 or maybe level 3 and assess what the traffic looks like at that time. And then the last thing, I think, which is probably the most important for me, is what is at the heart of the organization, which is the brand. It holds everything together. Essentially, your brand is how consumers connect with you. And I believe, right, that COVID has offered brands another opportunity to tell their stories in a very unique context. So consumers want brands to help bring like a sense of normalcy and to help them move forward with reassurance. So every brand really has the opportunity to offer this. I've used Nedbank as an example. I think the one thing you want to stay true to is your brand vision. And our brand vision expressed is basically to be the most admired financial services provider in Africa by our key stakeholders. And our brand purpose is to then use our financial expertise to do good for these key stakeholders. So individuals, families, businesses, and society. And this then culminates into our brand promise or our brand expression, which is see money differently. So it makes sense that how we show up in market is around showcasing our financial expertise or promoting financial wellness. And I don't mean to toot my own horn here, but I think we've done an amazing job as a bank in terms of the kind of financial or debt relief options that we've given to our consumers. If you look at our marketing currently right now, very much aligned to our brand promise and our brand expression, but taking into context what consumers are going through right now. So basically, your brand needs to be that ribbon that holds everything together. If I were to just quickly go through the summary of the takeouts, it's TV, radio, and digital exponential growth during this time. Alter your brand communication to ensure relevance. So make sure that your messaging, your creative, your tonality is fit for purpose, fit for context, whilst staying true to your brand story. Marketers need to keep their fingers on the pulse of these ever-changing consumer media habits, and we need to adjust what needs to be adjusted. And as we learn to cope with isolation, changes to entertainment culture may outlast the short term. And the last one really is brands will need to decide how to respond to this crisis, as this will ultimately determine their relationship with their end consumers for many, many, many years to come. And as consumers change their habits, these might become long-term habits. Which brands are standing out from the crowd in terms of demonstrating this? So, I mean, look, this is a fake Netflix billboard that contains spoilers. It was done by a student from an advertising school in Germany. And the whole idea was to encourage people to stay home. And the thinking was, if the virus doesn't stop you from going out, spoilers will. So they basically looked at key shows from the Netflix platform, and they put spoilers on billboards around traveling nodes to say to people, you should have stayed home. And so they show spoilers just as a way to deter you from being there. Yes, it's not real, but I do think that the thinking is absolutely amazing. The second example that I wanted to show, of course, this one is real. It's from South African tourism, right? If you think of SA Tourism's Short Left campaign, which aims to promote culture of local holiday travel, they were encouraging people to take a short left. And now, because of COVID, they've obviously had to pivot or zigzag some way. And instead of encouraging people to take a short left, they were encouraging people to stay home using the brand expression, don't travel now so you can travel later. I'll now play you the video. There's two of them doing the rounds, but I think this one really just echoes the sentiment of what I'm trying to get across.
Lockdown, our very way of life suspended. But do not be alarmed by what you see, by these lonely buildings, these quiet roads. Yes, there's fear. Yes, there is panic. But do not be alarmed. Because as we speak, humanity is taking a stand by taking a step back. Even as you're listening to this, ithemba lanyuka, with the promise that izodlula lento. And we will meet again. We will do the things that matter with the people we love again. We will go back to our favorite spots, and we'll even discover new ones. Shy around and go places we always said we would. We will travel again, and we will gather again. Sikhonze futhi. But for now, kasena sibaka, richachela murao. Because for us all to travel tomorrow, we have to stay home today. But here's one thing I can promise you. Noma Ganjani, we will make it through this.
This epidemic will pass if we act together. If we act now, we will overcome it.
A message from South African tourism.
Thank you so much.
Tatiana, thank you so much. That video is definitely goosebump moments considering the circumstances that we're in, and just showing how a brand is best utilize their own restrictions and how to put a beautiful message out there. Thank you, Tatiana. I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to ask that we move into Carla's session. So Carla, I'm going to introduce you now so that you can take your session. Carla, thank you very much.
Thank you, Narieta, and a privilege to be part of this conversation. So many valuable insights shared. For me, the baseline is that brand strategy is certainly strategy for uniqueness. And in considering our role, our responsibility, it's a company-wide function, it's an organization-wide function. And it's focused on, and I think both presenters, Robert and Tatiana, reinforced this beautifully. It's genuinely focused on the difference that we're trying to make in a particular market, in a particular environment. And what we need to hold on to in a time of crisis is that this difference, our sense of uniqueness, is what stakeholders have come to connect with. It is what our employees, our consumers, our supporters, our various stakeholders in the frame of suppliers and distributors have all come to connect with. And in that reliance sits trust. And that relationship at this point in time is core. It's where our stronghold is situated. It is where our equity is standing at this stage. And for me, three core principles are activated, and much like our previous presenters have reinforced the simplicity of things, it sits in the critical performance factors that we need to uphold in a time of crisis. And as an organization-wide function in managing these principles, we've entered a pandemic with a very clear and firm commitment, hopefully, to the unique difference that we make. And if we have that sense of certainty of why we do what we do, then we're able to hold course and we're able to, well, innovate within that space, repurpose our strategies within that space. I think the brands that are experiencing a very genuine sense of challenge over and above the reality of being able to successfully produce and deliver products and services are those organizations that have entered this pandemic uncertain of the uniqueness of their brand or brands. And at this stage, they would need to critically review their brand purpose strategies and why it is that people connect with them, where difference is situated, where that positioning finds its sense of strength. And it's a reality, I think, for so many of us. We're also mindful of so many small and medium enterprises in South Africa battling to survive. And the strength of those brand purpose strategies is an absolute priority. As Kantar's research then also confirms, and Robert referred to both Millwood Brown and Kantar's report, but it's a reality of a pandemic that is not just a crisis, it's a very ambiguous crisis. And when ambiguity is a very real factor in your environment, in your context, as Tatiana reinforced, holding north is vital. understanding where your uniqueness is situated, why you do what you do is your strength. If you have that sense of certainty, you're able to innovate, you're able to repurpose your experience strategies. It's when you're uncertain of why it is that you do what you do, of what that purpose strategy is all about. And at this stage, not having all stakeholder groups and especially your internal brand aligned around that certainty could present a tremendous challenge, which really leans into a second critical principle or performance factor, and very much related to this challenge of ambiguity and what the future holds. And here I totally support Robert's line of reasoning that we need to be very certain of where our focus lies. What is your most influential contact point? What does your experience strategy entail? Are you firmly focused on those points of contact with stakeholder groups that you simply cannot afford to fail at because of who you are, because of the unique difference that you make? And in this space, it's always a good idea to be mindful of the best practice brands. And one such a brand, of course, is Patagonia. We've come to know Patagonia as that upscale outdoor clothing manufacturer, designing clothing that lasts. It's promoting used wear and encouraging us to always think twice before we buy. It's taking that same value system, that very same purpose strategy and commitment to uniqueness to their most influential contact point. And that is, of course, the stores that consumers have connected with over time as community gathering spaces. It's the spaces in which consumers have been able to watch documentaries and to attend talks. Now, over and above taking these influential contact points online during COVID-19, we also see this best practice brand, Patagonia, really critically reviewing and repurposing employee and customer contact journeys. And they are determined to minimize the physical touch points to such an extent that any item will be touched only 3 times. So applying the very same care and attention that we've come to know them for, that we trust in, that we are connected with, that reliance that they've established over time, which then triggers the third critical factor for me, that third principle that we need to uphold when we are challenged on so many levels from a brand positioning point of view or purpose point of view, but at the same point in time trying to revisit and repurpose those critical contact points. And that is how we actually go about it. To ensure that your most influential contact points in your experience strategy remain relevant and remain purposeful under very trying conditions, I think you need to be certain that you are working with real insights, with genuine human truths, and that you are collaborating and co-creating with your stakeholders is certainly the most efficient way to do so, to remain in touch and to invite your stakeholder groups into the challenged areas that you are revisiting, reviewing, repurposing. It's Adrian Gore who recently organized his own platforms, reaching out to his employee base, triggering a whole set of thoughts around discovery's strategic direction. And he argued that we are essentially on so many levels breaking from the tyranny of habit, which is a very powerful line of reasoning and aligns in many ways with what Tatiana's also uncovered with shifts in consumer behavior, and to actually consider that 88% of consumers believe that they've shifted their online behavior is already a real signifier of needing to be in touch with real insights, real behaviors. And Gore's line of reasoning here from a discovery point of view, well, we've come to know discovery for its focus on wellness. And the world will certainly increasingly rely on healthy habits. So at the same stage, our reliance on online communities growing rapidly. So it makes perfect sense that Discovery is co-sensing and co-leading this space with their key stakeholder groups to redefine what doctor-patient relationships are going to look like in future. So to pull the thought together, these three principles, and support what our panel has been reinforcing with brand focus and real insight and context, I think we need to be very aware of how meaningful we are in purposing our brands, how meaningful we are in our current experience strategies, to what extent we are truly adding value to how people live life, to how South African consumers live and need to live life in a very challenged space. And a meaningful brand would certainly, at this point in time, vest in its unique value. And you do so best by engaging with your stakeholder groups when you need to revisit and revalue how purposeful your contact points are, because so many of those systems and processes are being repurposed at this stage. So the revisit of that brand experience strategy, being mindful of your unique difference and ensuring that you're truly adding value at your most influential contact points, should be at the center of your radar screen at this stage. Thank you.
Carla, thank you so very much. It's wonderful to see between the three speakers how there's a thread starting to develop. I'm going to move into the next section where we're going to allow for Greg to ask some questions to the panel. So Greg, over to you. What would you like to ask?
Well, thanks, Marietta. I think the insights are all, I'm finding them deeply meaningful. The thread is obvious, so I don't know if it's going to be that easy to distinguish my questions, but maybe just I should start with Carla last, because it's she's just spoken. Carla, your point about also the examples of Patagonia and that sort of community spirit in a brand. It talks to stories that I've been writing lately about hyperlocal. How do you think big brands are going to communicate that essence when essentially they're big scale, big outfits, and they have to take so much care at down the food chain, if that makes sense? Does that make sense? It's like God, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Sorry.
I think it's the complexity of things. And again, the complexity of things is Robert also demonstrated with Millward Brown's research and Kantar's research. When you're dealing with complexity and it meets up with a highly ambiguous space, what you really need to do strategically is hold on to the core principles. And I think that is something that pulled through with all three presenters. We all held on to, well, there's essentially 3 to 4 core principles that we need to respect. And at the heart of it, Tatiana concluded very powerfully in that space. At the heart of it is who you are and what you stand for and what that unique difference is that you make. So in that regard, for any big organization, or equally so for any emerging enterprise, you really need to understand at which particular touch points and where in your experience strategy, which again is an organization-wide strategy, and therein sits the complexity, but which contact points at this point in time, given the life that we are living, given the realities that we face, are the most significant contact points. And how could they be purposed and how could they be repurposed? I mean, it's when you're mindful of your most influential contact points that you're able to hold course. But when you are not entirely certain of where the uniqueness of your brands are situated and what their most influential touch points are, that you're at sea. You really need to get that radar screen well shaped and the entire team, all of your employees firmly focused on, folks, these are the critical success factors at this stage. These are our most influential contact points. And we are going to engage with all of our stakeholder groups. And I know this is a collective term, but at different points in time, different touch points are supported by sources of innovation, and it could be situated in your supply chain. Connect with people, start repurposing, but be very close to, as Robert said, be very close to the real truth. Understand that it's a real insight that is informing your repurposing of a particular process or system or a specific touch point.
Fantastic. Thank you. That really
Thank you.
answers the bumbling question. Thank you.
Greg, I'm going to ask, maybe Robert would like to latch onto that too.
Yeah, I think it is a question that no doubt bigger organizations are going to say, what do we do? How do we respond? And I think that sometimes we're looking at, as I go, bigger organizations have the unbelievable opportunity of using scale to have a difference. And when you put that lens on it, I think it starts to shift your orientation. And again, I go, where is your attention? Is it on the obstacle of scale, or is it on the opportunity of scale? And I think that there's two really simple things that I think brands who have scale should really put front and center. And the one is empathy and understanding of where your audience are at, your consumers are at, but also enriching. How are you providing a more enriching experience? And if you just take like a few examples, if I look at some of the work that we've been doing on Nando's, they've stuck true to who they are. Their role is to be a voice of the people and to provide relief through humor. And that is more relevant now than it has been. You take a brand like Apple and look what Apple have managed to do, whether it's through their TV campaign. I don't know if you've seen the ad creativity. You take a property like Today at Apple, and they've just reskinned that whole thing that was an in-store experience to Today at Apple at home. Now it's fully online, and it shows an empathy and understanding of where people are at, but it's also incredibly enriching. And it's because I come back to one simple thing. They're clear on how they want people to feel, and they're clear on the role they play in people's lives. So for them, it was just an adaptation. They didn't have to rethink.
So yeah, it goes back to your point about the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And I imagine with good brands, the same applies. Their past behavior has been successful, so it's going to inform their future behavior. So they are true to what they are.
Absolutely. I mean, I find it astounding how many CEOs I've suddenly heard from who I didn't even know existed. You're getting all these emails from CEOs telling you about what they're doing, and I've only heard from them once, and it was when the times were. And it's the most bizarre behavior. You've got to remain true and clear to who you are, and that just goes to show. And I understand why they said it, because sent those emails out, and we all got bombarded with them, but they were reactive. There weren't
don't
times
reach out in desperation. Reach out because you would have anyway.
Yeah, and yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. That's good.
Thank you, Robert. And Greg, would you like to ask another question?
I'd like to address Tatiana's. Thank you, Narita. I'd like to address Tatiana's issue of this obvious but really challenging migration to digital. And I wonder how, in light of everything that's been said, I found the numbers that Tatiana gave quite staggering, and I believe that makes sense. But for the average business person, that's quite a big adjustment, and I imagine there's a lot of immediately being quite overwhelmed as to what to do and how to redirect the spend to digital in a way that's authentic and is in line with your brand. Just broadly speaking, Tatiana,
I think digital is actually very low-hanging fruit, in that if you think of the POE framework, which is paid, owned, and earned, the digital sits a lot in the own framework, in that a lot of those assets are assets that you own as a business. So what is it that you can do to optimize your owned digital assets? Be it your website, be it your social media assets or your channels. What is it that you can use as low-hanging fruit to put together strategies that will not break the bank? And outside of that, if you think of social media advertising, it's also quite affordable. The fact that you can run it from your check account or your credit card, I think is a testament of how affordable and how easy it is. And it's hyper targeted, super targeted, so it allows you to reach the relevant people at the relevant time. I definitely do think that small businesses have an opportunity in digital. And innovative ideas do not have to cost an arm and a leg. And I think there's that perception that innovative ideas are very expensive. They're not. I've seen it in my experience that you don't need big budgets to effect big ideas or to come up with impactful solutions and meaningful solutions that ultimately contribute to the betterment of your customers or your consumers.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I suppose they're just mindful of what you said earlier is does it afford them another opportunity, your customers, to connect with you? I suppose if you had a guiding philosophy, would that be good in your social media spend or your digital spend?
Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of digital, is that, for the first time, you've got real engagement. I think radio was probably the closest medium that gave customers the opportunity to engage with a brand, in the sense that they could talk to the DJ about their frustrations. But now with digital and technology, you look at AI, chatbots, there's an immediate engagement with the brand in question.
Tatiana, and thank you, Greg, for your questions. We're going to move into a section where we've got 3 questions we wanted to ask the panel, and thank you for those that have RSVP'd and then submitted some predetermined questions. I've got 3 questions we're going to ask. The first question is, how might brands consider the psychological shift or our consumers' well-being, especially during a challenging time like we are experiencing now, and developing a strategic direction? Robert, would you mind responding to that one first?
Yeah, sure. And I think it probably follows on from what we discussed earlier with the first question, is around just being empathetic and being enriching. And I think that is what brands can do right now. And the brands that understand their role and their purpose will be able to adapt and adjust probably quite easily. You look at how Nike have just completely matched where consumers are at with the work that they're doing. And I know people go, oh, but they're Nike, oh, but they're Apple. They're also big, complex organizations, but somehow they're able to align the entire organization around what it needs to do. And so I think that for me, it's about wherever you're at, how are you driving that empathy, and how you're providing an enriching experience. I mean, I had a really simple example the other day. I used my car for the first time in a while, and the car battery was flat, and it then had to be replaced. And a small business, and they came, they replaced the battery, and just the next day, the manager of the branch gave me a call and just said, "Hey, I just wanted to make sure that everything was okay, and thank you for your business." And I just thought, what a lovely way to just drive reinforcement with that brand experience. And what was typically a commoditized purchase for me, I'm actually going to go back to them when I need some tires or I need something else, because they just showed they cared. And I guess that would be my guidance for a smaller or medium-sized enterprises. Pick up that phone your customers, show that you get where they're at, and take care with them.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that, Robert. Next question is, I'm going to ask Tatiana if she can respond to it, and I've got a feeling I know what you're going to say. The question is, due to lockdown, our economy is taking strain. What should a small businesses keep in mind in developing budget-wise strategies?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it earlier on to say, the perception is that innovative ideas are expensive. They actually not, and I think the second point that I want to make is really around urging small businesses to stick to their core competency. I find that ideation comes a lot more naturally, and it's so much more easier when you are approaching it from a place of strength. And I know that because of economic impact, people are always so tempted to try diversify and have their hands in 5 different pots. But if you think about it, you end up being but what do they call it? Jack of all trades, but a master of none. So it's important that you stick to your core competency, because no one ever says no to a brilliant idea.
Absolutely. You also mentioned that, make use of your low-hanging fruit, optimize your assets and use to your strengths. And Carla mentioned stick to your heart, and Carla mentioned stick to your purpose. So if you're clear on what you do, you can only enhance it. And like you say, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money either. I think it also links beautifully with our first Vega talks that we did on innovation, and you can go listen to it on the website. We also spoke about that innovation doesn't have to always be a bank-breaking exercise. You can do it in a cost-effective, meaningful manner.
Yes. And I think, sorry to interrupt, I think a lot of people think innovation is this grand idea. It's big, it's large, but you can actually innovate a process.
Correct.
You don't necessarily have to come up with a new product at the end of an innovation cycle.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, it's sometimes just a simple adaptation that we need to make. The next question is going to be for Carla. Carla, considering the various points raised, what do you think are the key strategic or guiding principles that you took out from the talk today? Carla, just check that you're not on mute. There we go.
Yeah, it's, for me, 4 things are really being triggered with a beautiful 5th that Robert's reinforced twice. The first principle really is holding focus. And I think we've all reinforced the importance of really understanding why you do what you do. It's that brand focus, it's the focus in terms of your contact strategy. And as Tatiana just reinforced in context of constraints, it's also the focus on your core competencies. So understanding what you are actually focused on in terms of your brand and your reason for existing in the first place is vital. Tatiana also used the beautiful reference of that ribbon that holds it all together. The second principle is definitely context, and Robert's reinforcement, Tatiana's reference to context, but Robert's reinforcement here of, what are you focused on in terms of real insights and understanding of people's behavior and asking the right questions. Then again, executing at exactly the right point in time for the right reasons with the tailored messaging. And understanding again the bigger contextual shifts in behavior, linked to that as well with the entire social media conversation and behavior, shifts and changes in that space. And that then leading into what is in all probability an absolute critical factor for us is performance and effectiveness. What are you measuring? And as Robert said, what gets measured gets done. So where for your brand is performance situated given your sense of focus, being mindful of this very complex context that you are active in, and what you regard as your focal points and your core competencies. And of course, then moving with your own metric, measuring what it is that you need to be measuring and holding course, getting it done. I think a very strong theme that pulled through as the fourth theme for me was please be present. And be present in that sense. And it's a meme we've come across in so many media executions recently. Please do not go dark. As people, we need to understand what we are connected to and why we can trust and rely and continue the relationships that we've shaped with brands over time. So not going dark and being present, which I'm going to then link to the final takeout, which relates to being present. Being present also implies that you genuinely care. And it is that call that Robert received. It is being empathetic, and empathy is not something you can fake. You either genuinely care about the difference that your brand makes, and we need to see it at this point in time. We need to feel it as consumers. We need certainty. We need trust.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sure. Those are some beautiful critical points that I'm sure all the participants and those that will listen later to the talk will definitely be mindful of when they now, reassess possibly their strategies that they've developed. I am mindful of time, but I am going to say that let's allow maybe 2 questions from our participants. So if any of our peeps that have dialed in for the talk, if you would like to ask a question, I'd like you to put up your little hand. The little hand is the hand on the screen that you can see. If you put up a hand, I will change the setting on my side to then allow you to be verbally being able to ask a question. So let's see, is there any hand that will go up for anybody wanting to ask a question? Okay, at this point, I don't see a hand going up. I will just give it a few seconds in case someone wants to pose a question. Okay, it seems like there's one hand. Okay, so I've got Patty. Patty, I'm just going to change the setting so that you can now talk. Okay, Patty, you can now unmute yourself and you can ask a question. If you'd like, you can also say who you would like to respond to the question. Patty, please go ahead.
Yeah, just a very quick question in terms of purpose. Now, purpose pre-COVID might have been in a certain direction. Do the panel members think or believe that the actual purpose of brands might have changed because of lockdown and COVID-19?
Okay, who from the panel would like to take that? Robert, would you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I don't mind having a first response to that. And I think what's so important is that I think marketing and marketers and advertising agencies, I think, got caught up in this world of purpose-driven marketing, which somehow became all about CSI and these kind of initiatives that were actually not really authentic or linked to the brand. And I think a purpose, when it is best articulated, is when it's clear about what they do and the value they bring to people's lives. And that's what I love about Adrian Gore. When he talks about discovery, he says something very simple but incredibly powerful. He says, we're in the business of helping people lead healthier lives. Now, that is relevant. It's what's differentiated that brand and built it. And it's more relevant now than ever. And I think it's about being as to what your purpose is. I think if it's not clear, now more than ever, it will show up.
And I think it would be very unfortunate for brands to change their brand purpose because of a pandemic. To Rod's point, your purpose should not need, your purpose should be able to be anchored on its own, and it shouldn't purely relate to CSI. It's basically an expression and a promise that you're making to consumers, because outside of brands existing to maximize shareholder value, they should exist to better the lives of the consumers or the communities that they serve. So if you are now finding yourselves as a brand changing your purpose because of COVID-19, you really are in trouble, and you've been in trouble even before the pandemic.
Carla, would you like to add to that?
I totally agree. Purpose strategy is not in alignment with CSR or CSI expression. As your CSR strategy is an extension of your purpose strategy. So purpose really defines why you came to market in the first place. What is that unique difference that you brought to a particular environment? Why do you exist? Why are you conceiving of certain new service expressions or investing in particular lines of product development? So holding course is absolutely vital at this stage, but I do think there is a dimension of purpose strategy, or just holding on to that uniqueness, that is vital, and that is aligned with being present, but being mindful of how you are present in a time of crisis. In a time of crisis, you've got to evidence that you genuinely care, and what you demonstrate in serving purpose is vital. So to continue communicating your brand purpose or communicating your uniqueness to the market without ensuring that your really influential contact points are really evidencing that you care, evidencing that you are serving your purpose. Just to use an example, I really connected with our insurance repurposing the pointsmen and women that we've come to connect with in so many different environments, who are now very active in taxi ranks and sanitizing taxis and so forth. So when you understand why you do what you do, you serve purpose. You're certainly not going to shift that because of a crisis, but repurposing your most influential contact points to demonstrate that you genuinely care is vital. You need to be present.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you, Carla, for that response. I don't see another hand up by the participants, so I'm going to say thank you, everybody. I'm also mindful of time. We're just after 11. This has been a wonderful discussion. There's a few critical key points, and Carla beautifully summarized it for us when we asked her the question, what were the principles that we got through? And I think Patty's question reiterated what I meant by purpose versus repurposing. And at this point, I think we all need to just keep our compass north, be clear on the brand purpose, and filter it through to all stakeholders. And at the end, that will get us through COVID, but also beyond. And I think that's vital, because COVID is not going to be here forever, but the impact may be. I would like to say thank you to each and every Vega Talks participants that have joined the session, and especially then for our speakers, to Robert, to Tatiana, Carla, and of course Greg that have joined. Thank you very much. We will make the recording available on our website, and have a wonderful day further. Thanks, everybody, and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.